I'd like to start by thanking the grace of heaven, virtues of masters, grand predecessor, transmitters, and all of you for giving me the opportunity to share this class today. And so I know for some people, it can sometimes feel like there are just a lot of rules to remember and a lot of new terms to remember in Temple, but truly the 15 rules and regulations, or you could say the 15 precepts, are one of the foundational concepts we need to try to learn and remember. And actually, maybe around 15 years ago, the recording angel channeled for, I think it was a staff member class, or maybe it was a lecturer and temple host class in New York. And the recording angel, he's the Buddha that's around 13 years old. He carries around a notebook and he notes down all the good and bad things we each do every single day. And when he channeled in New York, he actually tested the senior staff members on things like how to write the dragon scroll from memory and each of the 15 temple precepts. So that Buddha would test individual staff members, things like what's the 4th precept or the 9th precept. And I remember one of the senior staff members who knew most of the answers kept trying to whisper the answers to each person. And the recording angel had to ask the staff member to stop whispering the answers. But that staff member just kept continuing trying to give the answers to people. So finally, the Buddha asked that senior staff member the one precept that she couldn't remember. So that really just shows that sometimes we might have a good heart to try to, help give the answer to people. But when Buddhas ask us to do something, we really need to listen. And when Buddhas are trying to teach each of us something by asking us individually targeted questions, we need to pay attention and listen to what they're trying to teach each of us. And I'll just never forget that time because it really showed me that the Buddhas know each of us and what each of us need to improve on. And I also remember trying to avoid eye contact with the Buddha because I was so scared to be called on. So the 15 precepts, or you can say the 15 rules and regulations, they're really important for us to know as cultivators. And I also really find these 15 precepts really interesting because we're able to apply them to our daily lives and help make our lives more peaceful and help us be able to handle hardships a little more smoothly. So all of this is from a scripture about the 15 precepts. And the scripture says that the 15 precepts, they're set by God and are the unchanged true principles that we need to follow in this white period. So all cultivators of the white period need to know and follow these special precepts. So all of us, we're cultivators and disciples of the white period, which is the time period we are in right now. And the Buddha, Immortal Henzong Li, said, don't underestimate these 15 precepts, for they are a great ladder to permanent heaven. If we act according to them, one can more than achieve Buddhahood. So the Buddhas are giving us the tools and pointing us in the direction, but it's up to each of us to actually climb the ladder by learning these principles and following them every day. And then the scripture says, use the precepts as our teacher, which includes all precepts, right? Not just the 15 temple precepts. It also says, use the Buddha nature as our teacher. So the heavenly conscience, or we can say our compassionate heart, this is our Buddha nature. And we should always let our Buddha nature lead us. The true nature automatically upholds precepts if the mind and heart is free from any improper or evil thoughts or conduct. The precepts are embodied within our true nature. So our Buddha natures naturally do not have anything wrong or bad. So if we let it be our master and lead us, then we'll already have fulfilled these precepts. Right? So it's saying that our Buddha nature is already one with these regulations. And if our Buddha nature is our master, then we don't need to try to do these precepts. We'll naturally and automatically be doing them. So the first of the 15 is to respect Buddhas. And something to keep in mind is that Tao principles all have a more obvious surface meaning, but there's usually a deeper meaning too. So for this first precept, in this case, the surface meaning is more obvious. It's to respect the Buddhas, the immortals, the saints, and the sages. And that's part of why we do bows at temple, right? Is to show our respect. But Holy Teacher says, when we have a need, we tend to seek the external Buddhas for help and guidance, right? So a lot of times we see people who go to temples or churches, and they pray for Buddhas or angels to save them or to help them in their daily lives. But Holy Teacher asks us, how come we don't ask the Buddha within? So here, the deeper meaning for this first regulation is to respect our Buddha within each of us, right? So this is referring to our Buddha nature. The real Buddha is in our heart or mind. And as long as we do things without straying from the Buddha nature internally or the conduct of a Buddha externally, following the true principles and not going against the conscience, then that is truly respecting Buddhas. So what we want to do every day is to let our Buddha nature guide us and do not do anything against our Buddha nature, right? We want to match heaven's principles and not violate our compassionate heart. And that's the true meaning of respecting Buddhas. And Holy Teacher said, if we don't respect our own Buddha nature, how could we ever achieve Buddhahood? So Holy Teacher gives us an example. He compares Yin Hui to Zhenzi. And Yin Hui and Zhenzi were Confucius's disciples. So Yin Hui, he always kept in mind and had sincere faith in the Buddha nature because he knew life is short and unpredictable. And he seized every opportunity to perform kind deeds, accumulate merits, and establish his virtue. He, instead of cultivating and seeking externally, he wholeheartedly observed and cultivated the Buddha nature within. He was able to eliminate all his faults and his bad temper, and he even cultivated to the level of never putting his anger on others and never repeating a mistake. Okay? In comparison, Zhenzi, he cultivated by the way of the three introspections. And the three introspections are, 1, have I been loyal and wholehearted in my dealings with others in all matters? 2, have I been sincere and trustworthy with my friends? And 3, have I practiced and reviewed what I have learned? So Zhenzi, he cultivated outwardly, whereas Yin Hui cultivated inwardly. So this is reflected in their final achievement. Okay, so one cultivated internally, one cultivated externally, and in the end, Yin Hui, who cultivated internally, his position in heaven was higher than Zhenzi's position. And something to note is that Zhenzi had already cultivated to a very high level. And those external things he focused on are very important too. The Holy Teacher is kind of telling us how important it is to also cultivate internally, right? To cultivate our inner virtues. Does our Buddha nature have any dirt? So Holy Teacher is using this example to show us how heaven will evaluate us. And something interesting is that Yin Hui was able to achieve Buddhahood at only 32 years old, right? So while it's important that we continue to cultivate externally as Zhenzi did, we really need to also put a focus on internal cultivation and accumulate merits and develop our virtues like Yin Hui did. Okay, so the first precept, respect Buddhas, and that includes our own Buddha nature within. The second precept is to follow the seniors and to guide the juniors. So at temple, we maybe have heard people say these Chinese terms. The first one is qin shen, and the other one is hou xue. So in Chinese, qin can mean before or in front, and the Chinese word for hou means, after or behind. So the surface meaning in this case, qin shen can mean Tao seniors, transmitters, introducers, just those who came before us in the Tao. And hou xue means, humbly still learning, or you could say junior disciple. So people in the temple tend to replace the word I or me with hou xue to show that we're still humbly learning. Now, Holy Teacher says the more significant meaning is any person of virtue and wisdom, consistent in speech and action, who can be a role model or leader, is qualified to be called qin shen. Such a person is worthy of our respect, and we would be willing and want to follow. Okay, so in this case, qin shen roughly translates to worthy. Any person learning, cultivating, propagating Tao, and has not left the cycle of rebirth is a hou xue, or junior disciple. So you can just know, if you hear qin shen, somebody call you that at temple, they're giving you respect and consider you a senior and worthy, and we all try to say hou xue to show we're humble cultivators still learning. Now, to follow qin shen and to guide hou xue is to emulate and learn from saints and worthies, to respect and learn from people of moral virtue, to be humble and calm, to help sentient beings, and to let those who have affinity with us receive the support that they deserve, and to truly transcend into the saintly and rise above the cycle of rebirth. So if we're fortunate enough to be considered a ZhiShan or a worthy, then we must follow the example of the worthies that came before us. And we should lead by example for all the hoshers or the juniors, right? So we should be tolerant and kind to each person and not have favoritism. And we need to always just be good role models and guide all junior disciples. We should never bully them or look down on them. And what it means to be a good junior is to try to learn and cultivate sincerely. And since we should always remain humble, that's why we hear senior lecturers and transmitters still refer to themselves as hoshers or junior disciples, even though they've cultivated many, many years already. So we should maintain that same humility no matter what position we may reach. Okay, so to review, the first precept was to respect Buddhas. The second precept is to follow seniors and guide the juniors. The third precept is to maintain dignity and righteousness, as in the middle path. So what does it mean to maintain dignity and righteousness? When coming to temple and our clothing is neat, our hair is tidy, and appearance is dignified, is that what we call maintain dignity and righteousness? Well, the scripture says, if we just cultivate appearances, but not inner virtue, and let our sixth sense roots be covered in dust, then no matter how clean our clothes or dignified our appearance, this cannot be considered as maintaining dignity and righteousness. So we must not only be solemn in our heart, but our sixth sense roots also must be solemn. In other words, we can be completely free of distracting thoughts, can be solemn and self-restrained, then that is maintaining dignity and righteousness. So our six senses are the eyes, ears, nose, mouth, body, and mind. And if we're not careful, they can become our master and lead us astray, right? So for example, if we see something we like so much, we decide to steal it, or if we really like gossiping, etc., right? So we need to keep our senses in check and let our Buddha nature be stronger and let that always be our master instead. So how do we go about achieving this maintaining dignity and righteousness? So first, we must be upright in order to help others become upright. We must restore our bright nature in order to influence and reform others. After revealing our bright nature, we still must uphold propriety, words in accord with Tao, conduct is presentable to truly be able to influence and motivate Tao members. And then we need to use the attitude and impressive manner of maintaining dignity and righteousness to bring in and influence others. So why do we have to upright ourselves before we can hope to help others become upright? So we need to cultivate and improve ourselves consistently, right? Then others will naturally follow. So forms and appearances do matter because they should be a reflection of what is inside, which is our character and our virtue. So we say we shouldn't be attached to forms and appearances, but to an extent, we still need to put in thought and effort to be presentable because we're still representing the Tao in our appearance, our speech, and our behaviors. So this isn't saying, we have to be perfect all the time. We're all going to make mistakes because we're still hoshers. We're still humbly learning juniors, even if we might qualify as ZhiShan too, a senior. So the question is, can we admit to our mistakes? And then are we willing to rectify or upright ourselves? Okay, so these two are the foundations of improving ourselves and achieving our potential. So sometimes we may, accept or admit to our mistakes, but if we're not willing to change, to rectify ourselves, then we still cannot achieve. So we need to self-reflect often and have the will and determination to make the changes to improve ourselves. Number 4 is to follow the rules and proprieties. We just mentioned proprieties as a way of maintaining dignity. So observing the rules and proprieties is not just in the temple, but wherever we are, okay? So according to the rules is to apply the rules and disciplines in the things we do, and to abide by the rules is to carry out the rules and proprieties according to our position or role. This is called observing the rules and proprieties. And the scripture says, when we come to receive Tao, what kind of work are we going to do? Work to become saints and Buddhas. And if we do not follow the rules, then can we become saints and Buddhas? And if we normally do not act according to our position, can we become saints and Buddhas? So acting according to our position is a basic condition for observing the rules and proprieties. So externally, we apply the rules and disciplines to everything we do, and we carry out the rules and proprieties according to our position. It's important to know what our position and role is then, right? In this way, we know when and how to speak and act. So for example, if we're staff members, then we need to do the staff member job. And if we're lecturers, then we do the lecturer position. And if we're temple hosts, we do the temple host position, right? So we just follow the rules and proprieties according to what our position or role is. Now, Holy Teacher said, if we ignore the rules, how can we become saints and Buddhas? So he says, no matter how the transmitting masters instruct, as long as they're reasonable, everyone should follow them. This is to follow the rules and proprieties. Okay, so the rules need to be in line with Tao principles. They need to be reasonable and not go against our Buddha nature. Okay, and Holy Teacher has often told us that everyone is free to voice their views, voice their opinions, but we should always decide according to the majority. So what are the rules of the temple within? Originally, our nature is good, and we already have the conscience, the Buddha nature, and the Buddha nature is the temple rules. So for example, if we don't smoke or we don't gamble, would we ever need to quit smoking or quit gambling? If everything we do is already according to our Buddha nature, do we need to even worry about the regulations, right? So we would automatically already follow the rules if we let our Buddha nature lead us. And cultivating and practicing Tao is not to look at appearances, but to look within. And we must follow the external temple rules, but we must pay even more attention to the internal temple rules. Constantly wipe clean the Buddha lamp in the heart and not go against the conscience. That is truly following the rules and proprieties. Now, without external temple rules and regulations, it'd be very easy to slack off and potentially go astray from our path of cultivation. Also, if we don't follow the rules, then we might encounter some difficult situations and not sure how to handle them. So if we follow the rules, then most matters can be dealt with well. And also something to note is, as a society, we're nearing the end of time. So we constantly see people lose their way. They've lost their virtue and their morality, and they do things against their Buddha natures. So as cultivators, we need to be really careful not to commit sins ourselves. Otherwise, we'll lose our hard-earned merits and achievements. Okay, so therefore, we must do everything with a clear conscience and put into practice the spirit of these temple rules in everything we do. And constantly, we need to self-reflect, clean the dust off our inner Buddha lamp. Okay, so not only do we need to follow the external temple rules carefully, we need to also follow the internal temple rules. Number 5 is to take responsibility. Now, the surface meaning of this is to take responsibility for any task, duty, or obligation. And of course, we always should be a responsible person and fulfill our duties and obligations. But, Holy Teacher says, Tao disciples, what kind of responsibilities do we have? What kind of mission do we have? Don't we have a heavenly mission, and don't we have a worldly mission? The so-called mission from heaven is to ferry the original souls back home to permanent heaven. And the mission in this world is to purify the heart, promote the world of great harmony, encourage and promote upright moral character, make the family satisfactory, and harmonize society. So the deeper meaning here is that we need to take responsibility for our holy mission. And then Holy Teacher says, disciples, is this a great responsibility? Isn't it precious? So what do we all think? It's an honor, is it not, to be trusted with these missions? So we just need to be able to take responsibility for everything we do in Tao cultivation and propagation. And then scripture says, in this urgent and important end of time, we must control our thoughts, rectify our conduct, and be careful of all bad influences. We must not be reverent and respectful only at temple, but then at home, behave rashly and morally unrestrained. If we do not carry out the Tao principles, then that is not truly taking responsibility. So this is just kind of a warning that, our behavior is being monitored 24/7, not just at temple, but in every moment of every day, right? Because we said that the recording angel is watching us. So we need to be able to take responsibility and behave according to Tao principles all the time, not just at temple. The sixth precept is to emphasize the holy over the mundane. If we prioritize our individual affairs and think ourselves are most important, then this is emphasizing the mundane. Anything we do that is for the benefit of others or the public good, that's considered holy work. Then that is emphasizing the holy over the mundane. Therefore, those who truly emphasize the holy and view the mundane lightly, they will not just think of themselves. They're only concerned about others respecting them, liking them, and supporting them. And what's in their heart is prioritizing others and always considering the greater good in everything they do. These kind of talented people are truly emphasizing the holy over the mundane. Okay, so this is basically just saying we should always think of others over ourselves, and we should be selfless instead of selfish. Okay. And then a holy teacher says, in the entire universe, other than Tao being real, Buddha nature is real. What else is forever unchanging? Therefore, when we help sentient beings, they could have achievements. They join this path of letting go of attachments to transcend the mundane, then that is truly emphasizing the holy over the mundane. If we cultivate ourselves and have achievement for ourselves, we let go of the ordinary mind and bring about our Buddha nature. And that is also truly emphasizing the holy over the mundane. And then he says, cultivating Tao, propagating Tao, there's only one ultimate purpose, and that is to let go of all attachments, the ego, and restore that original heavenly heart, that Buddha nature. And when we cultivate Tao and cultivate our own heart and propagate Tao, we need to put in sincere effort on the journey. If we do not have most sincerity, an unchanging heart, with no complaints, no regrets, if we cannot show our heavenly heart true nature, how can we say we are truly emphasizing the holy over the mundane? So, we all have mundane matters to do in our daily lives, but they should not get in the way with holy matters. So it's not saying that we completely ignore our day-to-day duties or obligations, but it's saying that, if we have an obligation, we should still fulfill it. But it's saying that if we do our best to prioritize holy matters in temple, that is emphasizing the holy over the mundane. So for example, if we're able to, we can ask to take time off from work to help with temple before a Dharma class or any major event, or we could even help after work or on weekends. Just whenever we have a choice between mundane activities and holy matters, we should choose holy matters. The seventh precept is to be humble and kind. So the scripture says, be humble and kind, not only towards ZhiShan, or seniors and worthies, and not just to transmitters and lecturers, but to be respectful to everyone. Okay, so everybody has the same Buddha nature. We're all equal. So we should treat everyone the same kindness and not have favoritism. And Holy Teacher says, being humble and kind is when our Buddha nature reveals. When we humble ourselves and have no distinction between ourselves and others, no right and wrong thoughts, that moment is truly being humble and kind. That is truly our self-revealing, our Buddha nature revealing. And then he says, so humble people and kind people will definitely achieve Buddhahood. And the opposite, arrogant people that look down on others will definitely not achieve Buddhahood. Because when they're arrogant, they did not get rid of their distinction between themselves and others, and they still have attachment. So the heavenly lotus positions are for those humble and kind. So if we wish to become Buddhas, how can we not be humble and kind, right? And as ZhiShans or worthies, we need to be humble and kind in order to try to teach and guide the juniors. Okay, so we can be confident, but we should never be arrogant. And a temple and a Tao community, it depends on everyone being humble, kind, and harmonious in order to progress and expand and flourish, the Tao community, the temple. Number 8 is do not discard the holy teachings. So holy teachings are the scriptures and writings left behind by saints and sages. It can also mean the recorded words of Buddhas, saints, and sages, and these are all words of the truth. So this includes formal scriptures, sutras, classics, and any verbal guidance from Buddhas as well. Do not discard means not to abandon, not to disregard, and not to take lightly, but to practice accordingly, because all the scriptures, sutras, and classics are the heart, blood, and merciful words of Buddhas. So naturally, Buddhas and immortals protect them. So all of these teachings are helping to guide people to change from evil to good, from ignorant and confused to awakened and enlightened. If we have an upright heart and mind and always have a sincere heart and put in effort, right, to cultivate and practice the holy teachings, then heaven will always naturally help us too. And since the holy teachings guide sentient beings on the path to becoming saints and sages, and if disciples do not put them into practice, then how can we succeed in becoming Buddhas? Buddhas are greatly compassionate and kind. They're always giving great thought to the great matter of our life and death. They're always working so hard for us. So how can we bear to disappoint so easily and not put them into practice? So it's saying, we should not only cherish all the holy teachings from Buddhas, but we should show our appreciation by practicing all the Tao principles and really trying to follow their guidance. The true meaning of do not discard the holy teachings is to realize Buddha's kindness. Once we understand the true meanings and we act accordingly, then we can achieve Buddhahood. So physically, this is saying we should not throw away any printed books or scriptures, but it's also saying don't throw away the teachings from our hearts and mind and to put it into practice, right? So all of these Buddhas are pointing us in the direction of how to become a Buddha just like them. And it's just up to each of us to actually do it. Number 9, do not be attached to forms or appearances. So do not cling to the external form and be blinded by it. And Holy Teacher said, when the mind is pure, without motive, unbiased, not attached to anything or any form, not attracted or contaminated by external factors, not seeking anything, this is the middle way, the manifestation of the Buddha nature. So to not be attached to forms and appearances is the manifestation of the true self. Otherwise, to be attached to forms is to never attain Tao. Right? So because anything that has a form or appearance is not real, it's temporary, and eventually deteriorates into nothing. So our houses, our material belongings, even our flesh, one day will turn to dust and disappear. And the reason why most sentient beings can't be liberated is that they're still bound and shackled by external forms. So the heart and mind is a slave to forms, and the true self, the Buddha nature, cannot be the master in those cases. So naturally, sentient beings will always be wandering in the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth until they realize this. Therefore, as Tao cultivators, we must understand the difference between what's true and what's false, what's eternal and what's temporary, right? So all forms are false because they're not permanent and can change. So even the human conscious mind is false because it's constantly changing. And the only thing that is true and does not change is our Buddha nature within. Number 10 is to be honest and clear in transactions. Disciples, Tao members, donations of things or money must be clearly recorded. Otherwise, if we are careless and with a little bit of greed or corruption, we do not have integrity. Then in the future, we are sure to suffer. So disciples must be very careful about this because heaven's laws are very strict and even the slightest detail will be examined. So we have to make sure to not let any greedy or corrupt thoughts come about. In heaven, we each have an account book. In it is clearly recorded every little thing that we did without any deviations or omissions. So remember, the recording angel is with us every single day, and that Buddha is noting down every single good and bad thing we've done, and nothing is missed. So Holy Teacher says, from now on, donated material things and assets at temple, each must be recorded and reported clearly without negligence. In this way, procedures are clear and honest, and there's hope that we can achieve Buddhahood. Therefore, if someone makes a donation, it belongs to the temple, and if we do not report it systematically and in detail, if we do not use it appropriately, even if we spend only 1 cent of temple funds, because of that corruption and greed, the transaction is not recorded clearly and honestly, then we will pay the price through karmic retribution, even so far as to possibly reincarnate as an ox or horse to repay the debt. So we don't want to owe anybody money or anything, but we especially don't want to owe temple. So it's very important that we're very careful when handling anything of temples. So even something as small as pens or supplies, we should not take home from temple. Okay. So this past weekend at the New York temple, I actually saw a transmitter who took 2 water bottles and he put a few dollars in the donation box. So I'm not saying that, we need to do that every time we are thirsty at temple, but the point is, we should be not greedy and should always be careful and thoughtful of everything we do. Even if we do something by accident, heaven knows and it's recorded. So the accountants at temple who collect donations, sometimes they're not able to account for every single dollar. And in those cases, they have to pay the difference out of their own pocket to reimburse that person's donations. So it doesn't count as their own donation. Okay, so accountants, they need to take the responsibility very seriously and be very diligent in their records. So basically everything we do, we just want to do it with a clear conscience, follow our Buddha nature. And we need to try our best not to be careless and make mistakes. Number 11 is report when departing and returning. So the scripture says, to notify when departing and returning means to report clearly to ZhiShan or seniors upon completion of an assignment, or to notify and ask and follow the guidance from ZhiShan before dealing with Dao affairs. And upon return or completion, to report the status to the seniors as soon as possible as to not let them worry. This is basically saying we should just have clear communication and be responsible. So for example, if a staff member goes somewhere to propagate Dao, they should report to their transmitter before they leave, and then they should report when they return to give a status update on how it went. Otherwise, transmitters or the seniors will worry about if it was successful or not. Holy Teacher says this rule reminds us to be loyal and to be responsible in our dealings with people and matters, to uphold the order of seniority, follow proprieties when coming and going. If we can do this, then there will be a satisfactory account of matters and relationships will not be harmed. So if we inform our parents or our seniors when we depart, or if we report back when we return, then we're showing respect to them. And we can say this is really, an unwritten rule that we should all know based on propriety. And if we can do this basic duty well, then we'll have more trustworthiness and integrity and honor. And also, don't our parents and our family, friends, they worry about us no matter how old we are. So we should always let them know where we're going, when we're expected to be back. If we're going to be late, then we should text or call and let them know. And when we get home, we should try to tell them in person, if possible, that we've made it home. If we don't keep them posted, then how will they know if we're just late or if something's happened to us, right? So they'll worry unnecessarily. And this applies to temple too. So when we get to temple, we should do the arrival bows to the Buddhas and tell transmitters we've arrived. And before we leave, we should do the departure bows and also let transmitters and seniors know that we're leaving. And it's not just a propriety, but it's also a very thoughtful courtesy. Now, the deeper meaning is, the scripture says we originally came to the world with vows. For the return, we should always think of God and dedicate ourselves to Tao cultivation and propagation. Only then can we truly be said to understand the profound meaning of notify when departing and returning. So we departed from our true home in heaven a long time ago to come to this physical world. And when we reported to God that we were leaving, we made a promise to come back, to return. And we also made vows or promises to help bring back our lost brothers and sisters. So therefore, our mission and our responsibility in this world is to cultivate, to propagate the Tao, and to guide sentient beings onto this path of enlightenment. So we need to make sure that we cultivate ourselves and propagate well accumulate merits and virtues, fulfill our vows, and return back home. And senior transmitter Jin, he often says, we wouldn't go to our mother's house empty-handed. So when we return to our heavenly mother's house in permanent heaven, we also don't want to show up empty-handed. We want to be able to present God with our many achievements. The 12th precept is do not create chaos in the system of the Tao. And I would like everyone to note this picture where this guy is standing on two boats and he's about to fall in. So the scripture says no chaos means not disorderly, and system in this case is a rope representing the golden thread. And unify is the leader, master, or true principles of all things, which is also everyone's Buddha nature. So do not disrupt the system means that Tao cultivators must not stray from the true Tao. The Buddha nature must be the master in all we do, and we must not enter into divergent paths. This is the true meaning of do not create chaos in the system of the Tao. So as cultivators, we all know what is real, what is true. If we seek false forms and enter into the side doors, other paths, then we've disrupted the system and possibly severed our link to the golden thread that was passed down to us from our holy teachers, Sizun and Simu. So sometimes there are Tao members who like to attend other temple groups as well as ours. And while those temples may also be on the Tao path, they are a separate golden thread lineage. Okay, so transmitters remind us that we should not be inviting people who don't belong to our group, the Fa Yi Tong Yi Tao group, to attend our classes like the Dharma class, staff member class, talent class, even the temple host and lecturers classes. So we should always follow the rules. And if we're ever not sure about something, we can always ask the directing lecturer or transmitters for guidance. And Buddhas remind us that if we're standing on two separate Dharma boats, we're bound to fall, right? So we need to stick with our own Tao lineage, our own golden thread, and we don't want to get confused and get caught chaos by trying to be on too many different paths. Just stick to the one that we are on now. The scripture says there are two types of golden thread. One is from heaven and the other is of this world. The heavenly mandated golden thread is the divine heart and mind and Buddha nature. This is the Buddha mind that links us to heaven. So when our Buddha nature is our master, our mind is clear and calm without thoughts. So that's no desires, no attachments, no duality, no ego. Then we're naturally already one with heaven. The golden thread of this world is our prior affinities with introducer, transmitters, and ZhiShan, or seniors. During the Dharma ending age and universal salvation period, we have the affinity to come together to cultivate and propagate Tao. So that's why we are all able to be in this class together and cultivate together, is because of the good affinity we have with each other. Holy Teacher says, disciples during these end of times, false holy teachers and false Maitreyas appear one after another. They use all kinds of magical and transcendental powers and manifestations to entice Tao cultivators, thereby using the false to obscure the truth, using evil to disturb the righteous, even going as far as to proclaim oneself as having the heavenly mandate, passing off the fake as the genuine to disrupt, to create disorder and chaos in the temple and Tao community. So if we meet people who are telling us about these, false teachings and false practices, we need to stand firm and not let them in. So sometimes we've heard other people tell us that their temple has a 19th or a 20th patriarch, and they tell us to join them. But we know as cultivators that, the 18th patriarch and matriarch were the true last ones. So we must not be confused by their chaos. Otherwise, listening to them and following them will naturally disrupt the system of true Tao and will sever our golden thread with heaven. And there are many tests and a lot of trials that, we're going to encounter on this Tao cultivation path. But these tests and trials are necessary so heaven can see who truly qualifies to be a Buddha. So we need to have unwavering faith and confidence in the truth to succeed. And that's also why it's very important to follow all of the temple rules and regulations carefully and to follow all the proprieties. these are all set to help us on our paths to distinguish what is real and to make sure our Tao foundation is so strong that it can't be swayed by anything false, right? No chaos. So when we've cultivated our nature so that it is upright and proper and evil cannot intrude, only then is it truly not disrupting the system. Number 13 is to appreciate public resources, to take care of temple property and do not waste temple resources. So public things refers to public resources outside and within the temple. They belong to the public or the community of cultivators. Do we take good care of them? Do we cherish them? Do we make good use of them? To make good use of their function and value is to appreciate public resources. Or can we take them home for personal use? Holy Teacher says, disciples, we've already talked about number 10, keeping procedures clear and honest. You must know if we do not stop a little greed or selfishness, it becomes a major demerit or serious offense. Therefore, public things must not be taken for personal use or destroyed. So we did talk about this a little bit in number 10. So even something as small as pens or supplies, we should not take because that is for temple use, right? So we have to be thoughtful and cherish anything of temples and not just think of ourselves. The scripture then says, the transmitters and lecturers are heaven's messengers, heaven's people. If we do not respect them, do not protect them, then that is not appreciating public resources. And if we criticize them or scold them behind their back, that's even worse. So not only is appreciating public resources referring to temple's things, but also cherishing the people in temple. So Holy Teacher says, treat everyone well, love, help, and encourage each other. This is truly appreciating public resources. He says, those who stand next to us, we also have to cherish. If we do not cherish them, heaven will not send talent to help us. Then how can Tao spread well? So as seniors in the temple, we must cherish all of those people next to us. Okay, so number 13 is saying, we should not waste and we should appreciate and cherish all resources. That includes things and people. Number 14, be flexible and enthusiastic in dealing with any situation. So the true temple regulations are the Tao. They're unchanging. They follow changing external affinities, but they always go with the middle path and never ends. So cultivators should also have a flexible heart. Do not be so rigid and never changing. So circumstances and environments can change, but the Tao principles never change, right? So we as cultivators need to learn to be flexible, but also uphold the true Tao principles when handling any matter. And the scripture says, as long as our conduct and actions conform to the heavenly heart and benefit sentient beings, even if Chinshin cannot understand or even blame us, we can still continue to do it because we are doing heaven's work on behalf of heaven, not for an individual. It's a matter of sentient beings transcending life and death, not petty, mundane matters. Okay, so if we're handling every situation with our Buddha nature as our guide, then we don't have to worry about this, right? We're always acting in accordance with heaven. At any time, anywhere, we must learn to deal with matters as they come, but return to calm as they go. We should use the Buddha nature to deal with all karmic affinities. And at the same time, learn to use the heart and mind that does not become attached to the matter when dealing with it. Only this counts as being flexible in dealing with matters and can be said to have the highest wisdom. So Holy Teacher says, there is no fixed method of the Tao principles. Sentient beings have 84,000 different mindsets, and we must also have 84,000 ways of dealing with them. Okay, so some people are, very rigid in how they think things should be done. But if we're also just as rigid in dealing with those rigid people, then we're just going to butt heads with them and become frustrated, right? And the situation will get worse. So as cultivators, we need to be more flexible and more open-minded. And we naturally may encounter difficult people, at temple, at work, in our daily life, anywhere. We're always going to have, come across these situations. So therefore, we need to use our wisdom and our Tao principles that we've learned and apply them flexibly and responsibly while still adhering to the spirit of the rules and principles. Okay, so again, these are all guidance on how to use this in our daily lives to make our lives better. All right, the 15th precept is to be prudent and cautious in speech and conduct. The ancients say words are the sound of the mind, actions are the image of the mind. It means that words can express the inner voice of the mind and actions can reflect the inner image of the mind. So the mind's intent is reflected externally in words and actions. We cannot leave the Tao at any moment. Heaven and earth will not speak. The preciousness of Tao is represented by us. So how can we not be careful in our speech and conduct? How can we not respect our own Buddha nature? Not only does heaven have laws, countries have laws, and temple has regulations. If we are not careful in what we say or do, not only do we harm others, we harm ourselves. So Holy Teacher tells us that we need to speak to benefit others, lifting virtues, letting matters be good. As cultivators, we should speak of the truth, only talk about holy matters. We should not gossip. We should not speak in sin. We should not speak nonsense, and we should not laugh inappropriately. This is truly being cautious in speech. Now, Holy Teacher also says being cautious in conduct is the same. Not only does our speech and conduct need to be in sync, we need to be a model, do Tao matters. We should be the messenger of heaven, match heaven's heart, always consider sentient beings, and always be extremely prudent and cautious, and careful and strict of our own actions. Then we will rarely make mistakes, and we will not make mistakes in our speech, so that nobody will complain or hate our conduct. This is truly being a messenger of heaven and a true cultivator. Okay. So I know this is a lot of information. 15 is a lot to learn and remember, but whatever we can remember from today is good. Okay, and there's also some tips on how we can remember some of these 15 precepts. So maybe we can do that for a future class. But just to review, the first one is to respect Buddhas. Number 2 is to follow the seniors and guide the juniors. Number 3 is to maintain dignity and righteousness as in the middle path. Number 4 is to follow the rules and proprieties. Number 5 is to take responsibility. 6 is to emphasize the holy over the mundane. 7 is to be humble and kind. 8 is do not discard the holy teachings. Number 9, do not be attached to forms or appearances. 10 is to be honest and clear in transactions. Number 11 is to report when departing and returning. Number 12, do not create chaos in the system of the Tao. Number 13, appreciate public resources. 14 is to be flexible and enthusiastic. 15 is to be prudent, cautious in speech and conduct. So Holy Teacher says the 15 precepts are the propriety of achieving Buddhahood. They are the principles of cultivating Tao, the rules of propagating Tao, and Holy Teacher hopes that we can cultivate and propagate well, do these precepts accordingly. Holy Teacher guarantees it's more than enough to achieve Buddhahood. And we must remember these regulations were set by heaven. We should not make them up ourselves, especially in these end times. If we want to do heavenly work, then we follow the system, do these 15 precepts, then things will be smooth and we will match heaven's will. So I know that it can feel a little overwhelming, that the 15 new things to learn, to understand, and to remember. So what I like to do is to kind of set a goal for myself. So for example, we can try our best to learn at least one thing from each class we attend and see if we can apply it in our daily life, right? So then that's already a huge progress in our cultivation journey. So I just want to conclude and end with happy holidays to everybody. I wish everyone and their families good health and happiness, and I'm super thankful for all of you. If I said anything wrong, I ask for heaven's forgiveness and for transmitters and lecturers to please correct me. Thank you.